Hi guys, I'm PUTSY, welcome back to my channel and welcome to yet another monthly wrap-up video. In total, I've read 9 books, probably one of my weakest months in terms of reading, like around the 20th. I had a lot of things I needed to do off camera, so that's probably why. So I didn't read much for a week and a half or so. For that, 9 books is still really amazing, I know. But just like the last couple of months, I wasn't able to finish any physical books, which is really bad because for some reason I always started one. Even though I like them, halfway through the books I always decided to move back into my Kindle and I just forgot about all my physical books, which is really bad. But I did read 8 books from my Kindle. 5 of them are available on Kindle Unlimited and I listened to 1 audiobook. In total, in terms of pages, not including the audiobook of course, in total I read around 2,384 pages. That's the basic stats, and let's just get into the first book. So the first book I finished is a continuation from last month's wrap-up. This is still from the same series, which is Twisted Hate by Huang, the third book from the Twisted series. And I really like this book. I like every single book from this series. Just like the name suggests, there's always some significant twist in the middle halfway through the book that made the book so much more angsty and exciting to read. I feel like all of these books have kind of similar tropes, but in details they are very different. All 3 of them so far started off as kind of hate to love, or at least dislike to love. But in this one, this is like an absolute hate to love trope because they really were enemies, have been for so many years. It's about Jules Ambrose and Josh Chan. Jules is best friend of Ava from the first book and Josh is her brother. So in the first book we get brother's best friend, in this one we get best friend's brother. We also have friends with benefits, or more like enemies with benefits. We also have forced proximity, workplace romance, and also secret relationship because obviously they hate each other, they don't want anyone to know. So Josh and Jules have been enemies for years. Ever since Jules and Eva becoming friends, Josh just didn't like Jules whatsoever. He thinks she's not a good influence for Eva, so their hate for each other started from there. But one day, Jules got a job in this clinic. Little did she know, Jules have been volunteering in this place for years. I kind of already forget the detail, but one day they just decided, you know what, I'm lonely, you're lonely, what about we have one night stand or something like that? And they had a great time, so they decided, you know what, why not take advantage of that? We do this with no relationship whatsoever. But of course their feelings starts to grow for one another, but their relationship is not as smooth sailing because there's a lot of things going on in the middle of the book, especially with Jules. Turns out has a lot of secrets, and this time her past starts to catch up to her, which I really like. That makes the story very exciting. This book is very angsty, just like the other 2 books from this series. And one thing you have to know, this series is quite spicy, but I feel like the spice level gets higher and higher, like the books get spicier and spicier, which makes me excited but also very nervous for the last book in this series, which will be out in a couple of months. If this book is already very spicy and it tends to get spicier, imagine what the last book is going to be about, because I feel like it's going to end with a bang, especially with who the book is going to be about, which we already get some snippet of them from the second and third book, and I cannot wait. I'm super excited for that couple. It's very promising, and I'm sure the book will make me fall in love with them as a couple and their character even more, because that's what happened with this book. I didn't really like Josh's character. I feel like he's nothing special in my opinion. Josh for some reason felt basic to me. There are some things that I really don't like about Josh's character, especially the way he handled things when the twists start to happen. I also didn't like the way Jules handled things, but for some reason as a couple I just love them. Sometimes, you know, with hate to love, they get from hate to love really fast. You don't really get the tension from when they hated each other, but in this book I truly felt their hate for one another, and the progression from them being haters to kind of have feelings and love paced and built very nicely in my opinion. And with everything that's going on around them, every little things that happen in between hate to love just makes sense. Like in the end, I truly get why they started to fall in love. It just felt right in my opinion. Definitely one of the best had to love books. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time reading this. I give this book a solid 4.8 stars. There are some aspects in this book that I like more than Twisted Games, but overall I feel like Twisted Games is still on top of the list for me. So yeah, if you're looking for a solid like true hate to love, this is the book for you. Next is another series. This one is a duology by Sophie Lark, The Sinner's Duet. The first book, There Are No Saints, and the second one, There Is No Devil. I read both of them and I really like them. I gave this whole entire series 5 stars, but each book, the first one I give 4.5, the second one 4.8, so maybe like as a whole around 4.75 stars or something like that. This is a dark romance and quite dark because it's a romance story between two artists in San Francisco, but one of them actually serial killer. So there are two main artists, like the most famous in the city, Cole Blackwell and Alastair Shaw. They're both very successful. They're main rivals, but little did everyone know they are not only rival as an artist, but they are also rival as serial killer. And then one day they both laid eyes on Mara Eldridge, another artist in San Francisco, and Cole, who never paid any attention to anyone, especially women, for some reason was interested or curious about Mara, and Alastair saw that, so he decided to try to kill Mara first, and for some reason Cole's instinct tell him to protect Mara while also taking her as his student. He will be mentor to Mara, and the romance start from there. The series are quite steamy and quite dark and such a page turner. I couldn't stop reading it, but I honestly like the second book way more than the first one. There are a lot of faults in the first book in my opinion. Even though I enjoy my time reading it, I still gave it a very high score, but I don't really like the fact that the book is very jumpy in terms of timeline, which made it hard for me to connect to their relationship, because all the things that made them closer, we only hear them in passing. We don't really get to see and feel their connection building. I wasn't able to get attached to both Mara and Cole's character or them as a couple, but the plot itself I think kind of saved the whole thing. Quite entertaining and just different in terms of romance, because this is like the first romance book I've read that has serial killer involved in it. I kind of wish the book feel more thrillery, but we didn't really get that either. But the second book really enhanced the whole experience. We actually get to see a lot more of their character, their backstory. We get to know why Cole became a serial killer, get to see his past, his motive, the way he operates. We also get to know Mara's character more and why she is drawn to Cole's character, even though she knows she's not supposed to get attached with Cole. And there are also a lot more showing in this book, and everything in this book is just much more exciting in my opinion. I feel like the only thing I dislike about this book is Mara's friend treated very badly in this book. I ended up really liking Cole's character, and I feel bad for saying that because he is obviously a serial killer, even more than I like Mara's character, but I still think Mara can hold her own against Cole. I don't know, overall I really like this series. This is like a solid start for me to get into Sophie Lark's catalog. Really want to get into her other series. Next is the only audiobook I listened to in April, which is The Last Mrs. Parrish by Constantine. I actually started this around February or something, but for some reason I kind of stopped in the middle. I didn't really remember why, so I'm glad I finally finished it. This is a thriller mystery book about a woman named Amber Patterson who are trying to manipulate her way into the Parrish's family. She tried to be friends with the wife, Daphne Parrish, getting to know her family so that one day she can steal her husband, Mr. Jackson Parrish. So she's basically a con artist. The Parrish family is like super rich, and this book is divided into 3 different parts. So the first part is told through Amber Patterson's perspective. We get to see how she operates. The way she talks is very annoying, and I think that's done very deliberately. You just cannot help but hate her character so much. Just the way she talks about people, she's really bad. And the second part is actually told through Daphne's perspective, and we kind of go back a little bit into the past. We get to see how she met Jackson, how she becomes Jackson's wife, her relationship with Jackson and her kids and her mom. And the third part is the ending. And I have to say the first part can get a little bit boring, especially the very beginning of it, but there's always a massive twist in each part, and that's when things starts to get really interesting. And that whole twist in between part saved this whole entire book in my opinion, because if not, I would probably give this a very low score, because not only Amber character is not likable whatsoever, I also don't like the ending, because the author basically said whatever happened in the ending is justifiable because that character somewhat deserved it. But like I said, the twist really saved it. I cannot stop listening to it, and it puts me at the edge of my seat. I made a lot of guesses and not many of them were correct. The twist is quite mind-blowing in my opinion. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. So the next book is a very taboo romance book called Echo by Seven Rue. I don't even remember where I saw this book. I think it was in someone's video and I clicked a link in their video, because I think this book is actually banned. It's not even available on Amazon, I believe. I was curious to see what kind of books get banned from Amazon, so I just kind of want to check it out. Don't know why I decided to get into the book in the first place, and I actually read 2 books from her because they're very short, and I actually skimmed through it. I skipped a lot of it and I was kind of in the middle of a rut. It was just very fast to read. This is about a girl named Echo who ran away from her stepfather. She walked for days until one day she ended up in this cabin in the middle of nowhere. She welcomed herself into the cabin, and a few days later the owner of the cabin arrived in that place, and instead of throwing her out, they decided to keep her. The owner are 3 brothers who are basically hunters, which is why they have a cabin in the forest. And Echo, she cannot speak but she can hear. So yeah, this is basically a reverse harem with huge age gaps. I mean, thankfully she is over 18. I think she's like 19 or 20 years old or something like that. But these 3 brothers are way over 30 if I'm not mistaken. And obviously it's very spicy. This is actually not too bad in my opinion, because I get to see an actual relationship between Echo and those 3 brothers. They actually build some type of connection. It's not just purely physical. That way it's kind of a little bit redeemable. There's still some plot in it. There's also a lot of mention of animal abuse or killing stuff, because these 3 brothers are obviously hunters, and those things mentioned quite a lot in the book. Sometimes can be a little bit graphic in some parts, which is why that reduced the star a lot. It's not my favorite, obviously. An okay read for me. I give this book 3 stars. The next one, another book from Seven Rue called Genesis. Because this book is a novella, I thought, you know what, why not? I'm gonna read this. Seven Rue's writing is not the best in my opinion, but somehow they are very easy to read, which is why I get into this book. This book in terms of topic is actually way more taboo. The 2 main characters actually related by blood. So the main female character is Genesis. She falls in love with her uncle, I think, who's been her guardian since she was a little kid. So yeah, obviously there's a huge age gap. I'm pretty much okay with reading a lot of different genre, dark romance, taboo romance, whatever, but this book is extremely taboo and too much for me, which is why I give this book 2 stars. Not only that, I also don't really like the plot. There's actually a lot of things going on into the book, but Seven Rue is trying to pack as much plot as possible into this novella, and it just felt too much too rushed with very little detail. So yeah, I give this book 2 stars, and that's also me being very generous. Next book is actually yet another taboo romance, but this one is actually really good. It's called Always Been You by QB Tyler. I've seen this book quite a lot actually from a lot of people's recommendation. I think it's because the book was just released a couple of months ago. That's why I've seen this quite a lot recently. So first of all, it's a love story between Gabrielle with her older stepbrother James. Gabrielle was adopted into this family when she was 3 years old. James was already 13 years old or something. Obviously a huge age gap, like 10 to 12 years, and they obviously have the same parents. James has always been very protective of Gabrielle. They always have such close, deep connection with one another. Gabrielle is always been the most important person for James and vice versa. And now Gabrielle is 19 years old, going to college. She's in New York City, living in the same city with James, away from their family. They spend more and more time together, especially since they haven't lived in the same house for years now. Gabrielle always have a huge crush on James for so many years since she was very little, but James have always seen her as his younger sister until when she turned 17. He started to feel a little bit differently towards her, but both of them, even though they have deep feelings for one another, start to think of each other in a romantic way. They actually didn't try to pursue their feelings until now when she's 19, so thankfully there's no illegal thing happening. But I mean, obviously it will deemed as a sinful thing by so many people, obviously, which is why they try to keep it a secret. And I have to say, at least 50% of the book, maybe even more, is just pure smut. I feel like there's not much plot in this because they already have such deep connection with one another, but we also get to see their past, things that they went through, their bond, their relationship since they were very little, and in the end you'll get to understand how deep their connection is. Even though it felt very wrong, I also able to see why this is so right. It makes so much sense for them to be a couple. They're obviously soulmates, have been for so many years, but it's just a different kind of soulmates now. But yeah, there's not much plot other than that, but I still really like it. I give this book 4 stars. It's nothing extraordinary, but I still really enjoy my time reading it. And this book also made me excited to read another book from QB Tyler in the future. I feel like this month, not only did I had a little bit of a reading slump, but some of the books that I read is just a little bit questionable, and like, why the heck did I decided to read some of these books in the first place? I don't know. I watched someone's review, didn't know what they're about, and I just jumped on it and read them right then and there. And this one is yet another weird one for me. This is The Ice Planet Barbarians, a science fiction romance by Ruby Dixon. This is the first book in the Ice Planet Barbarians series. I'm showing you the new cover, but just search the old cover. That looks really weird, so I don't know why I still wanted to read this one in the first place. I love sci-fi movies, but I'm not typically love sci-fi books. I don't really read much sci-fi books in the first place, especially sci-fi romance. I always think sci-fi and romance just didn't mix well together. It will be very weird, especially in this capacity, because it's a romance story between an alien and a human from Earth. But for some reason it was actually quite enjoyable because of how weird it was, and it was very short, very easy to read. Surprisingly, it put me out of my reading slump. So in this book, there's a lot of 20-something years old women abducted by aliens. They woke up in a spaceship, and these aliens is actually the evil kinds, and they are trying to sold all of these women, I think, to some other aliens in some other planets maybe. And in their way, their ship actually have some trouble, so the aliens decided to ditch all the cargo filled of human women in this planet close to their location but still habitable habitable for Earth people, and that planet is actually an ice planet. It's very cold, and one of the girl who are the main character in this first book try to get some help, try to see what's going on in this planet, try to see if there's any kind of civilization, and on the way she met with human from this planet who are immediately take a liking to her, so the story goes from there. I know it's quite a famous book, a lot of people actually like this series, but for me personally this is typically not my cup of tea, but because of how ridiculous it is, that made me enjoy the book, especially because this is very short. A lot of the books in this series mostly below 200 pages. I don't know if I'm going to continue on with this series, especially because there's a lot of books in this series. I think there's already like 20 books or something like that. Crazy amount. But maybe if I find myself in another reading slump, I might. And I also think this is like a great in-between book, kind of like a palate cleanser almost, you know, to get rid of all those lingering feeling and memories and attachment from the previous books you read, cleanse you and prepare you for the next book you will read. Hopefully the other books are going to be as entertaining, maybe even better than this book in a lot of ways, who knows, but for this specific one I gave it 3.5 stars. So the last book I've read in April is the book that I've been wanting to read for months now. I've heard nothing but incredible things about it. One of Steve Borer's 5-star read. This is Archer's Voice by Maya Sheridan. Everyone who have read this book mostly said nothing but incredible things about it, and I'm so glad that this book didn't let me down because I had such high expectation for it. So this book is about Bree Prescott and Archer, set in a lakeside town called Pelion in Maine. So Bree is in the middle of kind of a road trip. She's been having a very rough couple of months, so she decided to get away to this town because this is actually one of the last place she remembers ever feeling really happy as a family together with her parents. So she goes to this place, she rents a lakeside house. While trying to settle in, she goes to the grocery store and then she met with this guy, but he's like kind of rude to her. He doesn't speak to her, quite dismissive, but for some reason Bree felt some type of connection, so she decided to find out who this guy actually is. Turns out that guy is Archer Hale. Basically is a very quiet, isolated man. No one speak to him. He actually cannot speak. A lot of people tried to tell her to stay away from Archer, but she didn't listen. So obviously this book is kind of a grumpy sunshine trope. Not really enemies to lover, but more like from very rude. With Bree's insistence, they actually start to form some kind of friendship. That friendship starts to grow as something more romantic, and I have to say I really like the progression of their relationship. Everything paced beautifully, nothing felt rushed. I feel their connection, and there's a lot of really tragic things happen to both of them in their past, especially to Archer, and I truly feel like they really help each other heal and grow as a person, especially Archer. And Archer is such a lovable, charming character. His character kind of reminds me of the main character from Lotus by Jennifer Hartman that I've read a couple of months ago. I think his name is Oliver or something like that. I'm not really good with names, so he reminds me a lot of him because they both have been touched by some really tragic, traumatic events when they were very little, but at the same time they haven't been touched with the cruelty of human interaction, and we get to see their character development and the way they try to put themselves back into human civilization. We see them trying to adapt with the way the world works nowadays. They need to catch up with society, and even though they experience some tragic, traumatic things, it didn't turn them into a bitter person. In fact, there's some innocence to their characters that make them very lovable and charming. And this book actually have duo POV, mainly from Bree's perspective, but there's also some chapter told through Archer's perspective, both in the present time and also the past when he was little, when he experienced those tragic things. And there's also a little bit mystery of what actually happened with Archer when he was little. I made a guess. I was kind of right, but also very way off. It was a little bit unexpected in some ways, and I also enjoyed that part. I love the scenery because obviously this is small town vibe. I love the fact that this happened in lakeside, and it's quite atmospheric as well, and it's very comforting in my opinion. Overall, this book is actually quite sad and emotional, especially towards the end, and the things that Archer went through is actually quite heavy, so make sure to check out the trigger warning. But I have to say, towards the end of the book, there's a lot of things going on, and Maya Sheridan just played with my emotion as if I'm a yo-yo, you know. She throw away my heart, put it back together, throw it again, pull it back again. It was kind of torturous, the last part of the book. I hate it, but I also love it. It's sad, it's emotional, but it's also very lovely. I love Archer as a character. I also really enjoy Bree's character. I love them together. I love them individually. There's a lot of things to love in this book, and I'm sure if I really nitpicky, I can find some faults. But as far as I'm concerned right now, I cannot think a single thing. I adore this book. I love it, and yeah, I gave this book 5 stars. So that's it. Those are the books I've read in April. Like I said, there are some really questionable books in there, but there are also some really solid ones, so I feel like it's quite a balance. Hopefully in May, I can have a much better reading month. I feel like I will. You know, I have a good feeling. And please leave me a comment down below, list all of the books you've read in April, and also let me know what's your favorite one. And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I don't know if it was interesting, but hopefully it is. And also maybe subscribe to my channel, that will help my channel a lot. And I hope I can see you in another video. Bye guys.